Hey guys, and welcome to this panel discussion. This is going to be the first in a two-part series looking at ministry kind of in the midst of COVID and ministry post-COVID. And today we're talking specifically about how we can re-engage those young adults that have shied away from the church. This is going to be a little bit of a conversation, recognizing that we're all facing that struggle. We're going to share, being candid, a little bit about what the reality is in our congregational context where we serve and where we attend church. And then we're going to begin looking towards our next gathering, whereby we're going to talk about how do we overcome this as the body of Christ, and what are new ways that we can explore in connecting this age group to the life of a life of faith and to a life of worship in the midst of being in community with one another. I'm excited to be joined today by Miss Latoya Red Thompson, who serves as our conference lay leader. We've got Reverend Scott Larson, who is the pastor at Brandon First Methodist, Reverend Cordell Sims, who's the pastor at both St. Paul and Biloxi, as well as Mount Pleasant down on the coast in Gulfport. Mr. Mike Howington, who is our youth and young families coordinator for the conference, and Reverend Christina Crabtree, who serves as pastor of discipleship and family ministries at Asbury Church in Petal down in the Hattiesburg district. We're going to talk briefly and want to let you guys know as you're watching, we would love to hear from you as we prepare for round two of this. We're going to welcome you to submit some questions and thoughts and concerns on some of the struggles that you guys are facing and how we as the Mississippi Annual Conference can begin to overcome this obstacle of young adults in COVID and young adults engaging them after COVID. So Christina, I'm going to start with you and ask you, I know Asbury is a church that is typically thriving with lots of young adults and young families. If you could briefly share with me, what's the climate been like for you guys since mid-March at Asbury?
Yeah, Trey. Yeah, we are mostly a younger congregation, and but I will say that it has been a really big struggle for even though we are a younger congregation to have them fully engaged in the midst of COVID. Um, First of all, we struggled as just a church in general. We were not ready to be completely online. So that was a big struggle, but our staff powered through it as all of us did, in trying to have that atmosphere of online for our folks. But we really didn't see much engagement from younger families during that time, and even trying all the different avenues, which we all did, of Zoom this and Zoom that and Meet here and Facebook Live here, and we just really didn't see much engagement in comparison to an in-person. So it was a really big struggle, and even in the sense of going back in person, it still seems to be a struggle for younger families to come back. I do have a few families that are legitly still afraid of COVID, but in the realm of the bigger picture, they just haven't returned. And to put a finger on that would be the winning ticket for our conversation today. So just a huge struggle. Our champions are what we consider the older congregation folks. They have been faithful and loyal, and even in the midst of online, they have been there. But for us, it's just been really a hard way to engage the families in a life of online church. So that's just been a really big struggle for us, for sure.
Cordell, I know that you're serving down on the coast, and I've had the joy of hearing you bring the fire from the pulpit. And I know you love to connect with those in the pews as you're preaching and building those relationships. What's it been like for your people since March down on the Gulf Coast?
Well, I think for us, it was a struggle at first, but the excitement we kind of bring around the word and around worship, it eventually draws them back in. But it was a struggle. It's a struggle getting people from the traditional style of building to being the church in their living room and in their bedroom. Most of them, they had an option now not to get out of bed. and come to worship. So that's a unique piece to this. And then, connecting families, trying to connect families and keeping them engaged. It's a struggle, but it's one that once one thing die out, I try something else. So we just continue to keep it rolling. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle to keep the ideas going. Even in the midst of this pandemic, it is a very hard thing for families and jobs. All of this is a very hard thing, and keep them engaged in church. However, I range from 1 to 88, and trying to engage them in worship. And so our young adult population really, we've tried to engage them in a couple of different ways, and we get different results. But the more we put on the table, seems like the more we get them involved. So if it's not this thing for you, it's that. So we're doing a little bit of all of those things to try to connect families. And people are still scared. There are people who are still scared of this pandemic and COVID. They're scared. And then there are also those who are okay with it. But there's some families still scared and will not return even in person. So that's the reality we live in. It's a struggle, but it's a struggle that it's a struggle that we are kind of working with, and we're not giving up on. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love what you said, filling up the table and just seeing what they take. That's a lesson in adaptive leadership right there. Scott, I know you are you're shepherding one of the larger congregations in the connection, and you guys have a functioning day school, kindergarten, and all that. What's it been like with y'all, with young adults in the midst of COVID?
Well, even pre-COVID, we had a difficult time engaging younger people in our church and are taking steps in that direction. COVID didn't help for sure. As we went online, it was very difficult to really measure who was there, and we're still having a hard time doing that. But in all the connections that we have had, we could see a diminishing connection online for our younger families and our young adults. Now, there are a number of families that, their ritual about being there, online. When we moved in person and then we moved back out of person, we just kept seeing the numbers falling for online. However, we've also seen that we needed to shift the way we did that. And we tried a number of ways in the midst of COVID to engage in various ways. We recognized that we couldn't keep saying, oh, we're just going to stop this and pick it up at some point in time. We need to do things in a new way. We need to be creative. And so we've spent a huge amount of energy in that way. And I'll just say all around, like, we're weary. It's, this creative space is weary. And I know many are just feeling that. Our staff is feeling that. Our people are feeling that. I mean, they're weary, not just of the whole of that, but taking steps forward. How in a normal way, we spend most of our energy, we have a routine. We're going, and so most of our creative energy is maybe 10, 20% of what we do, but now it's like 90% of what we do, and it just takes a whole lot out of you. And so trying to figure this out, especially with young adults when that's already a difficult thing, it's, I'll just say that's one of the big challenges that we face.
Latoya, I know that you've been a highly active lay leader, and you bring a kind of a unique posture that you have a little broader perspective and looking at knowing a lot of the churches and congregations and engaging with their lay leadership. Specifically regarding COVID right now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Why is it that some of our young adults and young families have kind of shied away from re-engaging in the life of the church?
Well, Trey, I think it's a matter of comfort in motivating young families and young adults to come outside of that comfort zone and to give them something that's worth re-engaging. Young adults tend to be pretty comfortable in a virtual environment. So I think once we get young adults out of the habit of going in person and just interacting with us virtually, that's a very comfortable place. As Cordell said, that's a place where you can attend church as you think you need to in the comfort of your home, in the comfort of your bed, and your kids can be in their pajamas, watching on their iPad or whatever. So it saves you a lot of time. It's comfortable. And why would they not do that anymore? Why would they come back in person? Why would they come and engage in in-person ministry or in-person worship service attendance? And I think, in order to answer that question, we have to look at the tangible benefits that young adults and young families were getting when they were engaging in in-person ministry and in-person worship. Those relational benefits where people in the church, whether they be older or not, were investing in them and building those relationships and building tangible skills that they could use potentially outside the church. Tangible benefits by the way of actually seeing the fruits of your ministry, seeing people fed from the food pantry, clothes from the clothes closet, that sort of thing. I think young adults really have to see that. And Trey, we've talked about COVID and about some people shying away because of that. I'm just going to say, like, personally, in my personal life, attorneys and other people, I've seen a lot of people in their 30s and their 20s, that are still socializing, that are still taking their kids to sports games, that are still doing other things other than church. So that's certainly a concern for some, but it's not a concern for a lot of people that would be keeping them from gathering in person for church and those sorts of things. But I think it's just finding what motivates these people and gives them the things that motivated them before to get them back into church.
And I think you bring up an interesting point. And I know Christina and Cordell both shared that they have members that are just, they're still kind of scared to come back and be around, and they're being cautious, and praise God for that. That's a wonderful thing. But, we also see the other perspective, and I'm seeing that some in Indianola as well, that there are a lot of young adults, they're just not scared. COVID's not keeping them from coming to church. They've just moved on to something else. And Mike, I think in talking with you and planning for this, I know that you kind of have the ear of a lot of our children's pastors and youth pastors and discipleship pastors. I would love for you to enlighten us with some of their thoughts and your personal thoughts on why it is that some of these young adults are shying away from returning to the church.
Yeah, so what we've kind of looked at in some research and some just digging in is that we feel like there is a truth in the idea that we know young families are busy. They're involved in so many different things. Our kids are in band, tumbling, baseball, soccer, dance, whatever, you name it. And so we know that the kids are involved in these things. And so every family unit might have a space for 3 or 4 extra things, but they've been putting 9, 10 extra things on their plate and running. So when COVID hit, everything shut down. Their life became at a pace that was more manageable. The essentials were always there. Then all of a sudden, baseball, soccer, all these things said, well, we're essential. You'll get behind if you don't. So they started doing that. Well, so they got re-engaged in those things. As churches kind of come back, it's been hard to re-engage because they're like, we don't want to go back to the pace we were at. I talked about the Field of Dreams. I made a reference about that the church model was like the Field of Dreams, which is if you build it, we will come. And that's how the church model functioned years ago. And it was productive because we were the central hub of the community and everyone came. And that model just doesn't exist anymore. You can't make your building big enough. You can't make your program shiny enough. The honest truth is that the world has so many extra things that our church has to fully embrace the idea that we have to go outside the walls in order to reach these people. And I think the pandemic has only poured gasoline on that fire that has shown how busy young families are, and it's made it really hard to reconnect them.
In our earlier conversation, Cordell had shared that, coming into a church, and all of us can agree on this, that there are just there's certain things that we might need to do away with or adapt or look at doing differently. I think we can all readily admit that, COVID has not pushed young families away from the church. This is an area that we've been struggling with for decades and decades. And Scott, I know now you're at Brandon, but I know for many years you served and did wonderful work at Mineral Wells and engaging young families in the life of the congregation. I would love to hear your perspective on just how deep this issue is in the life of our church, and maybe even some thoughts on how we begin moving forward in this.
Well, 20 years ago, I was a young adult, and so I'll just say that, and so it was a little easier to engage young adults when you are a young adult. That is one thing, which is why you've got to engage young adults, in order to engage young adults. But there's a space of moving with anyone in relationship where you've got to have that one-on-one, you've got to have that relationship and build that deeply. I think one of the things that COVID's done for us is it's accelerated the trends. And I think we've identified that. It's accelerated the trends that were already existing. And we know that, 20 years ago, we don't function the same way as we did 10 years ago or now. And so everything is changing, it's moving, and we're just now recognizing a reality. This is, it's showing us reality of why maybe we haven't done a really great job of building deep relationships with young adults in our church, families across, or depth of relationship with Christ, because they're running to ball games, but they're not running to the church. So I don't know the answer to why that is, but I do know that when they find that thing, they do run to it. And I think right now it's still the same as it's been for 2,000 years, that it's the cares of this world, the lure of wealth, the desire for more things that chokes out the word. And, Jesus teaches that it's still a core thing. So I always ask this question, is the mission of Jesus more important than your preferences or your comfort? That's helpful in making decisions in a bigger picture, but even in our lives, like what is it that we're doing that truly draws people? And so we have to do that in attractional ways, but we've got to do that in the deepest of ways. But figuring that out is a difficult thing. And right at this time, I think it's just helped us see reality. COVID has helped us to see what's been going on, but it's almost helped us to see now what would have happened maybe 5 years from now is happening right now. Like that trend has been so accelerated. And so anyway, I don't have the answers for that. I've looked at, we've experienced some great things in reaching young adults. But one thing I see is that in this generation, it almost doesn't matter what generation, but especially young adults, we've got to develop deep relationships. And right now, that connection, that one-on-one, bringing people together in ways that we can, in deeper connections, is very important.
For y'all, and for you guys watching at home, I hope you're hearing this, that we're of one accord, that we're facing this reality that really has been around for decades, but now it's been brought, into clear vision for us of connecting young adults to the life of our church. And, Latoya said they want something tangible that they can feel and touch and be a part of. And you've heard the word in relationships said from every voice that's been spoken. We're going to come back together and we're going to talk about some solutions to this more. And I hope in joining us that you've maybe you're breathing a little lighter, knowing that if these problems are happening in your congregational context, you're not alone, that we are in this together. And I think we can all admit it's going to take all of us coming around the table and a deeper sense of commitment and being more intentional and ministering to young adults for us to overcome this obstacle. And there beautiful opportunities await us as we bring our giftedness and our perspectives together and continue this conversation. Want to let you know that your voice is needed, and we're going to gather in a couple weeks after Thanksgiving and begin on a trajectory of talking about, maybe what's next in different areas that churches are seeing success, maybe some best practices. We would love to hear from you. And there's an email address that's popping up on the screen right now, and we'd love for you to email that and put, young adult conversation in the subject line. And then, we'd love to hear your thoughts, your concerns, your struggles. And, I'm sure some of you have some beautiful glory sightings. We'd love for you to share those with us of where you're seeing fruit in these areas. And when we come back together in a couple of weeks, we're going to share some of those things and talk about them. So know that your input is needed. As we close today, Latoya, Scott, Cordell, Mike, Christina, thank you guys for your input. Thank you for your willingness to be a part of this. Thank you for you guys that are watching at home. And I really do want to challenge you. I hope that you'll email so that you can be a part of this conversation as well. And we're recognizing that we're all of us, pastors, lay leaders, we need to bring our best. We need to bring our first fruits in this ministry of connecting young adults and young families to Jesus and connecting them to the body of faith. So I hope you'll join us again in a few weeks. And in the meantime, want to wish all of you watching, all of your families and your congregations, a wonderful and a happy Thanksgiving. God be with you, and thanks for joining us today.